It's great to live in Nebraska. My great-grandfather, James Butler, was born here in February of 1847 at Fort Ponca, near Niobrara, Nebraska, up near the Missouri River, about 20 years before Nebraska became a state. The previous winter, some very kind natives saved my great-great-grandfather, John L. Butler, and his family from starvation. And I'd like to think that the blacksmith on our state seal was the first blacksmith in Nebraska, which was my great-great-grandfather. Later, in 1854, the family moved out west, where John ran a blacksmith shop in Green River, Wyoming. He states in his personal history, and I quote, "I did my best in all things I was asked to do, kept the forge hot, my anvil ringing, and my gun handy." Still a good way to live. Do you love what you're doing? Are you doing what you love? Are you living your dream? Are you being true to yourself and to others? Well, I asked myself these questions as I taught for more than 30 years in various universities. I searched for many years after retiring from Colorado State in 1995, with the help of my wonderfully supportive wife, a true partner, to find a place where we could provide an excellent educational experience for those interested in excelling in the farrier's arts. I wanted to be free to innovate for the students' benefit without interference from unpractical administrators I came to expect in university settings. I worked at perfecting my own skills, first by seeking out and working with the best farriers in the world. And since I believe you cannot effectively teach anything that you can't do yourself to a high standard. And I researched and wrote textbooks since there were none in my field, and I tried to communicate the importance of having a teacher, as a student cannot expect to reasonably expect, really, to rise above those who they let influence them. Now here in Nebraska, we found the ideal place and facility for our licensed public school, a private school. And we live in a supportive community in Chadron, Nebraska, and have resources to provide the education we believe all horse owners deserve. One of my first farrier students back in the 1960s, when I was teaching at Cal Poly, was a kid with a master's degree in political science. His father was a respected attorney in Los Angeles, but he wanted to be a farrier or a horseshoer. And I believed him. But I soon learned that he wasn't naturally talented or coordinated. He burned himself in the forge. He cut himself with a hoof knife and the nippers. He filed his knuckles off with a rasp. He hit his fingers and his knees with a hammer, ran nails through his hand, and daily got kicked out of business. Everything came hard for him. But I underestimated his persistence. And eventually, after he took the course 3 times, he could shoe a horse. I didn't hear from him for several years. And then he wrote me and said that he had become quite successful at shoeing racehorses at Santa Anita, and he was thrilled with his career choice. I didn't hear from him again for 20 years. One day he showed up in my office door at CSU. I recognized him right away, and he told me his story. He'd made several $million shoeing racehorses for very wealthy people. He'd owned several very expensive homes, been married several times, and traveled around the world. But his style of living had extracted its toll. His spirits were low, his self-worth and his net worth were 0. He took me out of the office, and we went out in the parking lot, and he showed me his sole possession, which was an old beat-up car pulling a very small camper trailer. His health and his wealth had evaporated. His future looked bleak. He regretted with sadness that he hadn't held on to his family, invested wisely for retirement, and took care of his health. He hadn't been true to himself. He'd violated businessman Jim Rohde's 3 keys of success: stay healthy, stay happy, and stay hooked. Another experienced fellow I talked to said it this way: marriage is grand, but divorce is 100 grand. My heroes have always been cowboys. And at first it was the singing cowboys of yesteryear. As a child, I dreamed of riding the range all day, and my models were the good guys in the white hats, the high-riding heroes in the Saturday afternoon matinees, later in the weekly radio and television shows. And I thought nothing could be better than living the life of a cowboy. Later, I had the chance to lead this idealistic life, and full-time and then part-time. And it was even better than I'd imagined. Have you ever asked yourself what kind of life I would like to live if I could live it? Well, my 10th grade teacher gave me a challenge to write an essay on that in November of 1957. I started out by saying the kind of life I would like to live if I could live it is that of the American cowboy. There's a number of reasons I'd like to do this, and then I went on, enumerated those, and closed with the chief reason I'd like to live this kind of life is because it's simple and uncomplicated. It's not artificial. It's real life. Well, now 55 years later, here it is 2012, I've lived that real cowboy life, coached intercollegiate rodeo teams, and I'm doing what I like to do, which is teaching farriers to take better care of horses. But it hadn't been easy. There's been some hard and lonely times. In his best-selling book, Standing for Something, published in 2000 by Times Book, Gordon B. Hinckley said, "In leadership and standing for principle, there's loneliness. But men and women of integrity must live with their convictions. Unless they do so, they're miserable, dreadfully miserable. Never before in the history of the world has there been a more profound need for leaders of principle to step forward. It's not wise or even possible to divorce private behavior from public leadership. If values aren't established and adhered to at the top, behavior down in the ranks is seriously jeopardized and undermined. And indeed, in any organization, this is the case, be it a family, a corporation, a society, or a nation. The values neglected in time will disappear. No nation can rise above the strength of its homes or the virtue of its people. The time has come for good people everywhere to demonstrate they stand for something. So I ask you, what do you stand for? And do the people that you associate with know what you stand for? Everywhere we look, character is under attack. Kids search in vain for models of heroes that live by a character code. It's my hope you'll resolve to ride on a life on a higher trail, and I call that a cowboy code. Now, I like to use the singing cowboys metaphor when discussing these principles that I've learned on the trails and in the trials of life, since most of us at some time or another think about being a cowboy. Now, when I was a kid, I told my dad, when I grow up, I want to be a cowboy. My dad says, "Son, you can't have it both ways. You either got to grow up or be a cowboy," okay? Well, Gene Autry, America's favorite singing cowboy and tremendously successful businessman, and my childhood hero, said, "Well, I don't deserve all the success I've had, but I've had arthritis, and I don't deserve that either." And then he said this, "If your youngster has a faith to live by, he'll never wander off the trail. As any cowhand will tell you, if it's easier to keep on a well-marked trail than it is to hunt a maverick once he's wandered away. Even when you find them, they don't always want to come back. It's like that with youngsters. Give them a trail to follow, something to guide them when problems come along, and you'll never have a maverick on your hands. Even when the grazing looks greener off the path. Your kids, if the path leads to something, the kids will stay on it. Even though they can't see the destination, they'll stick to it. It's all in believing and having faith, and I guess that's the biggest gift that any parent can give to a child, and it's more valuable than anything money can buy. Well, there's a well-marked trail to follow in raising your family or running your business, one that will lead you to the clear streams and verdant pastures where the skies are not cloudy all day, and where you can ride the high and bright ridges of delight in a world that often chooses to dwell in the deep and dark canyons of despair. It requires being true to yourself and to others. And so are you true to yourself and what you know? Well, Gene Autry used the Cowboy Code to govern his behavior in his 93 feature films, 91 television episodes, and in his everyday life and business. A cowboy will never go back on his word. or a trust confided in him. He'll always tell the truth. He'll be gentle with children, the elderly, and animals. He'll help people in distress. He'll be a good worker. He'll be clean in thought, speech, and personal habits. And he'll respect women, parents, and his nation's laws. A cowboy is a patriot. Reggie Jackson, the home run king that was recruited by Gene Autry for his Los Angeles Angels baseball team, once was asked, "What kind of contract do you have with Gene Autry?" And he quickly responded, "Contract? I don't need a contract. He's a cowboy. His word's enough." Is your integrity that good? When our son Peter was 4 years old, we took him on his first trail ride. Well, even though Pete's heroes had always been cowboys, he was a little worried about riding outside the corral. So we dressed him up in his cowboy outfit from boots to hat, went out to the barn, saddled up his little pony Coco, and we headed off down the trail. We rode down this narrow trail into a creek bottom on our property. My wife was in front on her horse, I was behind on my horse, and Pete was in the middle just hanging on for dear life. All of a sudden, Pete's saddle came loose, and the saddle rolled underneath the pony with Pete in it. And Coco stopped, and he held his foot in midair just inches from Pete's face. The pony stood as still as a statue, so not to step on Pete. Oh, what a great pony he was. But the pony was patient, too, because he was enduring Pete's screaming. "I'm hurt, I can't move, I'm gonna die right here." So I got off to see if I could help. "Don't touch me, my legs are broke, I can't move. I'll never ride again." Well, now, but this time I was experienced, you see, because he was number 6. "Pete, I'm sure sorry you're hurt, but you can't quit yet. We got a long ways to go on this trail." "I can't move. I'll never ride again. I'm going to stay right here." "Well, okay, Pete. You know, you can stay here if you want to, but I've been down here before. I've seen some pretty big snakes down here." "I think I'm going to be all right. Let's get the saddle straightened up, and Dad, let's stay on the trail." We all need to stay on the trail. Today, it seems that parents try to teach what they think is right for their children. It's often belittled and shamed by the media, by their peers, and even by some school teachers. We can't always know what these self-appointed critics are doing or why they're doing it and choose to do this, but it might be because they feel guilty that they're not living up to their own true potential. They're not being true to themselves. I believe people need a guiding character code. Like Roy Rogers, the king of the Cowboys, and Dale Evans, the Queen of the West, had a writers club that several million of us kids subscribed to in the 1950s. And this is what we had to do, pledged to do. Be neat and clean, be courteous and polite, always obey your parents, protect the weak and help them, be brave and never take chances, study hard and learn all you can, be kind to animals and care for them, don't smoke tobacco or drink alcohol, eat all your food, never waste any, love God, go to Sunday school, and always respect our flag and our country. Now, apparently these were also Roy and Dale's house rules, too, because their son, Roy Rogers Jr., in an interview said, for their life story, kids knew there was no gray area with Roy. It was either right or wrong, left or right. And that's what people liked about him. He was a man who stood up and said what he believed because he knew it was right. And he stayed that way his entire life, and it was a constant guide that people could lock onto in their lives. So ask yourself a question that Jim Cathcart, president of the National Speakers Association, often asks. How would the person that I'd like to be do the things that I'm about to do? What makes people want to be excellent at what they do? Purpose, patience, persistence, they're all important. But the only way to get good at anything is to practice doing it. Work is its own reward. I believe we don't really own any type of knowledge until we can model it and pass it on to others. This is a fundamental truth that must be understood when you're teaching college students or you're parenting young children. The old axiom, those that can do and those that can't teach, is about as far from the truth as a politician's promise. All you really have to bargain with in our low-trust society is your integrity. It's difficult to raise kids today. It's difficult to teach, to get students to pay attention. There's just so many distractions. Courtesy, conscience, and common sense are all but absent in our society. The entertainment industry, a traditional source for heroes for our youth, has chosen a downward path. To curtail these negative influences the bad guys can have on us, I suggest we go back to a simpler time, even if it's just in our imagination. With heroic role models, the good guys, the people who make clear moral choices that are governed by their cowboy code. They said what they meant, and they meant what they said, and they taught us that integrity has value. Once, many years ago, when I was experiencing some hard times, I took a vehicle I owned into a dealership to see what I could sell it for. The owner offered me what I thought was a fair price, but he said he had to pay me by check. Well, I wasn't from that town and didn't know the man, so I decided to go to the local bank before closing the deal. I walked in, took the first available teller, showed the card of the man to this teller, and I said, "What can you tell me about this man's check?" And this lady, without hesitation, said, "Sir, whatever that man gives you, it's as good as gold." Well, I went back and told the man what she had said, and he wept because he had worked hard to develop a reputation of that type of integrity in his community. He was true to himself. We teach what we are, not what we say. Often we don't learn what effect it's had on others until long after we give it. We must persist, even if we don't know the result, just because it's the right thing to do. Imagine my joy when I received a letter from Cairo, Egypt, 28 years after I'd had this student in my college classes. Now, Bob was not a particularly good student in the academic sense. In fact, he was quite poor. His parents were good people. They had faith someday he'd get it. But to their disappointment and mine, it didn't happen while I had him in my class. Maybe it was because he was an aspiring bull rider that wore a black hat, and probably it was because his brains hadn't come in yet. Looking back on my college years, I know I didn't take advantage of all the opportunities that were presented. That's an understatement. You entered my life when I needed solid direction and guidance for 4 years, and you strove to help me achieve my potential. I took every class you taught and assisted in some, and I never met a true craftsman until I met you. An individual that was the best at what he did. You showed me that education, dedication, time, and desire were all that required in equal amounts to reach the pinnacle of one's chosen profession. You set a fine example for a young man to follow. The things you taught me carried over from school and the horse world into other endeavors that I've gone through life. I want to thank you for teaching me and placing me on the right path to learn the science and artistry of being a farrier. Throughout my life, it has served me well and never been far away. Since I left college, I've continued to study, to learn, to perfect the craft for no other reason than my own self-fulfillment. I only work on my horses, the horses of my friends, and the horses of the poor or horses with severe injuries or disease. I never charge, and I always try for that unattainable perfection you used to always talk about. And then he said some things about his family and his employment. That meant a great deal to me. We need to live so that our families and others, including our children and our students, will see a constant guide that they can lock onto in their lives. Of course, life isn't always going to be smooth riding, and you can't expect to not stumble once in a while and have some spills on the trail. But by sticking to your guns, you'll be able to get back in the saddle again. Shakespeare said it this way in Hamlet, when Polonius says to Laertes, "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it follows as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man." Be true to yourself. People instinctively trust those who live by a code. I call it a cowboy code, a surefire guide to riding the trails of life. My name's Doug Butler, and I approve this message. Thanks for listening. Happy trails. Thank you.